when people say to me, well, how can a Republican win in California? I give them the speech you just pretty much gave.
Yeah.
I say that, look, when safety and security has now risen to a top...
It's not a political issue. It's not a Republican issue.
Right. It's a Californian issue. And most importantly, it's a top 3 issue. The polling shows that safety, security, and homelessness now rank in the top 3 issues to 78% of Californians. And at that point, it's a wake-up call, or you might want to call it a woke-up call for the woke folks.
Never heard that. That's good.
And and it'll make people look to see who they're going to vote for Attorney General, because that position amongst statewide positions is uniquely situated in voters' minds with their safety and security. And so what I'm convinced is that people will look at Rob Bonta, our current California Attorney General, who's adopted the most far-left criminal justice agenda in complete alliance with George Gascon and Chesa Boudin. And they're going to say, is that guy keeping me safe at night? Are his policies keeping me safe at night? Is the fact that he took the job as a chief law enforcement officer with absolutely zero law enforcement background?
Oh, give me more details on that.
You'll love this. Rob Bonta was an Oakland assemblyman for 8 years. Before that, a deputy city attorney for San Francisco. Before that, an Alameda city council person. That's it. Was he a DA? No.
He never prosecuted criminals on either side or helped criminals on the other side.
Not even as a defense attorney.
I see.
He had literally no experience with the criminal justice system or the law enforcement system as a lawyer in that system. Yet he's become our chief law enforcement officer. I joke around that when I speak to voters that I say, Rob Bonta and my beautiful Labradoodle Lou share the same amount of law enforcement experience, which is 0. And so that, and again, Gavin Newsom, who appointed him, could have picked anybody, any DA, moderate, someone who doesn't hate America or hate California, but really wants to protect them. And there's plenty of hardworking DAs out there in the system that Gavin Newsom could have picked. But he picked someone who gives me a chance to actually win this race. No law enforcement background, in complete alliance with George Gascon and Chesa Boudin from San Francisco, and he has no statewide name recognition. Sort of an added factor for the election.
He never won an election, right? He was appointed.
He was appointed to the office of Attorney General, so he's never won a statewide election. The only election he ever won was for the Alameda City Council and for and as assemblyman for Oakland. That's it. So he's never had to put himself out there with real Californians, people who aren't in that little sort of bubble of Oakland, and they live in the north of this state, the middle of this state, the farmlands of the state, the south of the state. This is all foreign territory for Rob Bonta. And I believe he's going to be in for a harsh wake-up call himself when he sees that Californians are not subscribing to his far-left agenda and are actually and materially concerned about their safety and security in a way that his agenda won't even get close to meeting.
Now, it's not only stories in the news that we read about a criminal bumping next to a target's car, so they get out of the car and then they hijack the car or carjack it or hold people up. It's not just that we read it in the news, but I had some people visiting me from out of state. They rented a car at the rental agency, and the rental agent told them, please don't lock the car when you leave the car. Don't lock the car because they'll break the windows, and that costs us more than if they just go through the trunk and the glove compartment. Please don't lock the car. So this is not just, hyping on the news. The news is always telling you something to make sure you don't change channels during the commercial. But this is real stuff that's happening. And these smash and grab at Nordstrom's in broad daylight. 20 gangsters driving up in different cars with sledgehammers and crowbars, middle of the day. And because, of course, COVID gives them cover, they can wear face masks, right? So they can't readily be identified. And they go in and they smash the cases and steal materials in broad daylight. And it's not going to get better until there's a new attorney general. It is not going to get better.
I 100% agree with you, because the signal they're getting from the California Attorney General being transmitted to them by the local district attorneys is that there are certain crimes with no consequences. That somehow they feel their pain of their upbringing,
And
which is
these
like
people, they're not stealing milk and sugar and bread, right? They're going to high-end stores stealing jewelry, high-end sneakers, or whatever.
Right.
This is not a matter of subsistence. These are not people who are starving. This is not from some old Russian novel, right?
Right. This is not a scene out of Les Miserables.
Yeah.
Where the guy's stealing the bread to feed his family.
Right.
No, they're stealing for drugs. Supply their drug habit. They're stealing to live a lifestyle that they don't want to, engage in hard work to actually obtain. And again, they're getting the license to do this from the California Attorney General himself, which is the shocking part, which is why I'm running.
The effect. Tell me about the effect on the police department, on the cop on the beat.
So you hit on it earlier in one of your statements that if the officer knows that if he goes to the trouble of arresting someone, writing a report, sitting there typing it out, interviewing witnesses, it's a long process to get it right because you want to win it in court. Then you present it to the district attorney's office. And they get it, and they give it back to you with that big stamp that says declined.
Declined.
You've just, in essence, wasted your time.
Yeah.
You could have been on the street. You could have been doing anything.
And you take risk when you arrest people. Officers take risk.
Absolutely.
The criminals usually are armed or they're violent. They don't want to get arrested.
Right. And so what happens is once that happens once, twice, or in a systemic way, then you stop going ahead and writing the report, which means you then stop going ahead and arresting the person to begin with. Because if you arrest them, you got to write the report. Then you stop answering the call. So if the CVS calls you, you either don't respond to it or you get around to it when you're going to get around to it. And then what happens is the CVS person knows the police aren't coming. So they stop calling. So they'll just make a note for their insurance. But that's okay with CVS and Walgreens and Nordstrom's. But what about the small businesses that don't have that level of insurance? What about a restaurant?
And just because something's insured doesn't mean there's no cost to it. The insurance rate goes up or the insurance next year is declined.
Right.
And this has led to, I believe, 10 CVS's or Walgreens closing in San Francisco.
100%. Because that's how business works. Business says
if you can't make money, you're going to close the doors.
Right. And imagine, you got some old elderly person, because this was in downtown San Francisco, that counts on the pharmacy that she can walk to. Now that's closed. Now the one down the block's closed. Eventually they're going to have to go miles away to find the pharmacy that they need their prescription meds from.
And it'll get further and further away because that crime, once those stores are closed, the criminals aren't going to stop just because the stores are closed. They'll go to the next one.
And then the tragedy is the people who watch this, who have the wherewithal to move, they move. They move to safer places. The people who are stuck behind are the poor that supposedly the Rob Bontas, the George Gascon, cares about.
Right, sure.
And these are the ones being left behind because of their policies, and they can't see. They can't see the net, or maybe they do see it, but they certainly don't articulate the consequences of their policies.
Yes, the spiraling negative effect on society, you can't calculate it because here's what happens. There are people who are generally honest. But if they see somebody walking out of the CVS with $900 worth of stuff and they're standing in a long line with $20 worth of stuff, they might just walk out with the $20 worth of stuff. So what happens, the respect for law and order declines over everybody. It's not just the hardened criminals. The people who would normally be honest are now going to say, fuck it, I'm not going to stand in line. They'll leave with it.
Well, it was that whole broken windows philosophy. It's a book that came out in the late 70s, early 80s. Chief Bratton from New York,
Right,
who eventually came to Los Angeles, propounded it. And the theory was, look, if you allow criminals to graffiti a subway and break the windows, that when people are looking around, they're seeing lawlessness exist and grow. It actually affects their thinking on whether or not they want to be lawful.
Right.
And so, again, that's a spiral of lawlessness, but you can reverse the spiral. When you fix the broken windows, when you get rid of the graffiti.
Giuliani did that in New York.
He did.
He fixed the
Giuliani
broken windows.
might have had problems later in his life.
Yes, right,
But
right,
when he
right.
was the mayor of New York,
He did the right
He worked
thing.
with Bill Bratton, and they built New York back into
They
the great
built
city
it back.
it
They
was.
did stop and frisk. They knew who the criminals were. They knew if you're hanging around, 5 guys hanging around in a corner, hey, get over here, let me frisk you. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It's
Well,
statistics.
and then and then what happened? Interestingly, back to that spiral of lawfulness. When people knew that they might be frisked on the street, they stopped carrying guns. They stopped carrying their drugs on the
So
street.
It makes sense, yeah.
And the amount of crime that then started to not happen went
The
and
other
started to escalate. And then all of a sudden, people would start having picnics in parks again because they weren't worried that the drug dealer next to them would have a bad drug deal. Guns would come out or knives would come out, but usually guns, and the bullets would start flying. When that wasn't happening because people were being stopped and frisked and their guns were being taken away. And again, even when they weren't being taken away, it was the deterrent message.
Right.
Because the reason they didn't carry their gun
They're afraid.
to a park to have a gang fight out is because they knew they could be stopped and frisked.
Yep.